Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz on the show tonight.
A district our size, that is the best way for us to manage.
Schools are back, but so is COVID. New promises from the CEO of Chicago Public Schools.
For the next at least a couple of weeks, for sure.
But some parents say schools aren't safe as the teachers union contemplates a walkout.
Long lines persist at some testing centers, plus the FDA expands booster eligibility for adolescents. We have the very latest.
Local restaurants, bars, and gyms must now check proof of vaccination. We hear from some business owners on what this means for their operations.
Employees at a Starbucks in the Loop make moves to unionize. This and more business news from Cranes.
Low interest rates and the desire to make pandemic moves fueled a hot housing market in 2021. Will it keep up the pace in 2022?
We're definitely happy to be one of the few people that are still standing.
And meet two African-American women who saved the city's last lesbian bar. But first, some of today's top stories. Day one of the city's new indoor vaccine mandate that applies to most public indoor activities. Mayor Lori Lightfoot toured a Pilates gym in Lincoln Park this afternoon as businesses like restaurants, bars, and exercise facilities put their Vax Check policies in place. The mayor did not take questions from local reporters, but appeared nationally on CNBC this morning to talk about the policy. The mayor also issued a statement reaffirming her belief that CPS children should be in school for in-person learning despite the surging Omicron variant. We'll have much more on all of this in just a bit. Meanwhile, COVID hospitalizations in Illinois are at a record level, and today Governor J.B. Pritzker says he fears it will only get worse. Public health officials report nearly 6,300 people currently in hospitals across the state being treated for COVID-19. 89% of the state's intensive care unit beds are occupied, with COVID patients making up more than a third of that total. The state also reports just under 21,000 new cases in the last 24 hours and 30 additional deaths. The governor says the vast majority of those hospitalized are unvaccinated.
It is frustrating and tragic that 2 years into the pandemic, with multiple widely available and free life-saving vaccines, that we are once again in this horrible position. Neighbors are holding off on important medical care like hernia repair, colonoscopies, and early-stage cancer treatments.
And the state's largest healthcare system is warning today about the situation at its hospitals. Officials with Advocate Aurora Healthcare say the system is seeing its highest COVID hospitalization rate since the start of the pandemic and is dealing with staffing shortages and fatigue. Officials also say they've had to pause some non-COVID related treatments because of the overwhelming stress on the system. Those officials are pleading with the public to take COVID precautions.
And the situation is growing more challenging by the day. Beds are very tight and wait times are long. And really significantly, our team members are under, I think, a lot of stress right now.
And there are multiple reports this evening that Illinois Congressman Bobby Rush will retire at the end of his current term. Rush is in his 15th term and has held Illinois' first congressional district seat on the South Side since 1993. He most recently was the House sponsor of the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act. He was a member of the Illinois Black Panther Party in the 1960s, and he is a cancer survivor. He tells the Chicago Sun-Times he made the decision in part because he wants to spend more time with his grandchildren. And up next, checking in on the first day of school after the holiday break, so please stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabee family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And as you just heard, COVID cases are reaching new heights. This as students across Illinois are headed back to their classrooms and setting up a potential standoff between Chicago Public Schools leadership and the Chicago Teachers Union. Amanda Venicky joins us now with more. Amanda, how is the Teachers Union approaching this?
Well, Brandis, the Chicago Teachers Union set to vote tomorrow on returning to all remote learning, citing Omicron. And teachers do have the backing from some parents like J.P. Paulson, who today did send his fifth grader and junior to their respective Southside schools with some sense of security because they are each vaccinated. but he says he would rather they temporarily have the option to learn online instead.
The next 2 weeks, because that way everybody who's come home from the holidays, from vacations, from being at the movies, they can we'll know for sure then if they have COVID and it will die down, and then from there we can sort of see where kids stand, and also just our city in general.
Shutting the district down all across is not something that CPS CEO Pedro Martinez is considering, though. Martinez spent the day visiting a handful of schools and says it brought home how varied the reaction to and impact of the pandemic has been for different communities. He says some schools that he visited, a lot of students and staff were absent. Others, students and teachers, excited to be back. It's why Martinez says a tactical approach is best.
I'm definitely committed to having a school-based metric. And I think, and this is the conversations I've had directly with CTU leadership, it has to be a metric that really represents the times that we're in today, right? When we look at old metrics, they really don't apply because we have 91% of our staff vaccinated, over 100,000 students vaccinated. We still need to get more. But the fact is, vaccines were not in place with those old metrics. And we know with Omicron, it spreads a lot faster, it's milder. I'm committed to come up with those metrics. I think we can do that. It's going to be a hardship for families. So that's the only thing I've been asking is let's figure out how to balance the hardship for families.
Ryan Griffin is the parent of 2 fully vaccinated CPS students, ages 5 and 7, and he is making a plea to Chicago teachers to recognize the importance, which he says they well know, of in-person learning and to not take that away.
Fundamentally, who runs the district right now? And I think the teachers union is arguing that they have the right and ability to shut down a district that serves 330,000 students. It's perplexing to us as parents that we turn to public health officials for information about the pandemic.
He says they turned to public health officials, not teachers. And by the way, Chicago's top doctor has said that schools are actually safer for children, that they're more protected in the classroom than they would be out and about in general, or perhaps on a play date where masks aren't worn. Also, Mayor Lori Lightfoot says that she is relying on science, including data that shows low transmission of cases in schools. We cannot ignore the sad lessons of a whole district resorting to remote learning. Significant learning loss, particularly among students of color, severe hardship on families who had to work and could not come home, to homeschool students, mental health trauma arising from isolation. We cannot forget that shifting fully to remote learning is not a panacea and comes with significant harm to students and their families, she says. Now, among CTUs asked prior to returning to class today was requiring everyone, all staff and all students, to come with a negative COVID test. Now, CPS pre-winter break did distribute some 150,000 tests to students who attend schools in the hardest hit areas of COVID. The district says of those, only about 40,000 were returned, and then half came back inconclusive. Hollis's kids' tests were among those, he says, even though they followed all the instructions. He suspects it is because of how far the tests had to travel and because samples are no longer good if they are more than 48 hours old.
It's just too bad that there wasn't a local lab that could have processed it within a day, or that if we saw those pileups, somebody could have literally driven it over there if that was the case. But instead, ours went to South Carolina.
Martinez says he's frustrated by this experience, too. He says that in distributing those tests, the district was trying to ensure access to them, but he says he learned it was difficult to pull off an initiative like that with schools closed for break.
We're going to learn from that. We're going to learn those lessons, and we still have over 135,000 tests that are out there in the community. We want to make sure they're used well. I have shared openly that my goal is to use those tests as children are being quarantined for them to be able to have access to that test so they can come back sooner. And I believe if the schools are open, we can work with the families to make sure that it gets done well.
Martinez says the district also working with the vendor to resolve any issues, and the vendor expanding in-school testing this week, he says.
I told the CTU that we're open to bringing back the health screener In fact, I'm having our technology department resurrect that. And then the only thing I ask is allow schools to make those decisions, because it creates a lot of logistical issues for families. So for me, again, anxiety level varies by school. So allow schools to make those decisions, but let us have that ability. And I am committed, Amanda, to finding ways to continue to expand testing. I completely agree that we need to find a solution to that. And it's been very frustrating for me just how difficult it is to increase capacity here.
Martinez also says that 200,000 KN95 masks are on their way and should be mostly anyway distributed to schools by Wednesday. He says he is hoping to nail down metrics for COVID closures this week. Now, will that be enough for those anxious teachers? Brandis, I'm going to leave that to you to find out just ahead. So tossing it back to you in the studio.
That's right, Amanda. Thank you. Now, as CPS classes are back in session, the Chicago Teachers Union is working up a plan to potentially gather educators to walk out of schools on Wednesday. Some union members and educators are demanding CPS move to remote learning amid the current surge in COVID-19 cases. Mary Lori Lightfoot says the schools are, quote, the safest place for students to be. Though tomorrow, CTU's 25,000-member House of Delegates will vote on what they will do next. Joining us now to discuss CTU's plans is Stacey Davis Gates, Vice President of the Chicago Teachers Union. Stacey, welcome back. So CPS also released a statement today saying that test results are not required for students to return to class, but advise students to stay home if they are sick. Also concerned about closing schools, leading to higher transmission of the virus, as Amanda just reported, potentially harming students' mental as well as physical health. Considering all of this, what will CTU members do if CPS does not decide to transition to remote learning?
Well, Happy New Year, Brandis. One of the things that I'm struck by in the lead in to this interview is that our CEO just said that, let schools decide, their own fate, so to speak. And so this morning I was at Park Manor, a school on the south side of Chicago, where I stood with workers and parents who have made a decision that their school community needs more, that it's unsafe. Those workers received a threatening letter from the CEO, basically telling them if they don't report in person, that they were gonna get docked pay. Part two of that, parents received letters from Chicago Public Schools demanding that their children attend school in person. So the irony in that statement and the reality in which we are experiencing the pandemic under their leadership are two different things completely. Furthermore, reading the mayor's statement, she says all of these things that schools help to provide our students. We agree. We absolutely agree. The small issue we have is that none of the things that she enumerated in her statement are actually happening in our school communities. You've seen the rates of trauma, not just from COVID, but for the unrelenting violence in our city. So, we hear one thing and our members are experiencing another thing, and they're very concerned about the district and the mayor's ability to deliver on any of their promises. We keep hearing that testing is going to get better. In fact, I think the mayor told us in August that she was disappointed in the testing. Then we see photographs of tests, on the ground outside of Walgreens, piled on top of FedEx boxes. So you feel which one is it?
So you feel like, as you said, they're not delivering on those promises. So at a virtual town hall meeting yesterday, the union has said that about 80% of CTU members do not agree with this week's return to the classroom. What is it that you'll be asking your House of Delegates to vote on tomorrow?
Unfortunately, our union is again being backed into the corner of being the leader in the city that the mayor refuses to be. We are being placed in a situation of where we're going to have to take a vote for a remote action, not to walk off the job. And I want to make that real clear, and not for an indefinite amount of time during remote learning either. We have seen how this variant behaves with the South African, what happened in South Africa. We know that this is going to decline. We know that there are other districts across the country here in Illinois. In fact, the charter schools where we represent members, they are on a 2-week pause. They are testing for reentry. All of the demands that we have put forth to the mayor and Chicago Public Schools are also the demands that we put forth to all of our charter contracts. Ironically, CPS has said no, and they've said yes.
Now, according to CPS's district-wide data, nearly 4,700 students have tested positive, and nearly more than 1,700 adults have tested positive. That is since the start of the school year. Currently, CPS data shows that 2,100, just over 2,100 students are in quarantine. More than 1,500 adults are quarantined. I spoke with a delegate at a school today. She said 40% of their students were out today when they typically have, well above 95% attendance. What are the metrics that you were asking for, Stacey, in bargaining to require return to remote learning?
So again, the CEO said that those are old metrics. I would like to draw his attention back to the public health commissioner here in Chicago. This was her metric. She put this metric forth, and she told us, matter of fact, made a very convincing argument in bargaining that this metric was created for a time just as the one that we're experiencing currently, that it was supposed to make be something that would give us assurance that in a surge that, was out of control, and I think 23% is out of control, would give us the opportunity to take a pause, get things back in order, and then re-invite our students in. Listen, in order to have school, we're going to need all of the mitigations in place. All of the mitigations are not in place in every school community. Part two to that is, where is the mayor on anchoring vaccination sites in schools where we have less than 50% vax? Where is the mayor on ensuring that testing is a regimented part of our experience? Right now, we have 50% of our high schoolers that are vaccinated and only 30% of our elementary school students that are vaccinated. Those numbers, coupled with how vaccinated and boosted people are getting COVID, that causes a lot of concern, because now we're talking about the inability of grown-ups to be able to staff our school communities. So you have the virus on one end, you have the staffing on one end, and then you have a mayor burying her head in the sand.
And Stacey, before we run out of time, it feels like you and I had this conversation about a year ago. Does this feel familiar to you, and why do you feel like some of these changes have not been made? Because we are different from a year ago. We have a vaccine now.
We have a vaccine that has been unable to stop the spread of this particular variant. So the vaccine is only as good as people take it. Again, 30% of elementary school students are not vaccinated. The vaccine is only as good as we anchor it in our school communities. I'm absolutely crestfallen at having to experience this again. I'm not experiencing this just as a union leader. I'm experiencing this as a mother of 3 public school students who love school, who want to be in school. And the only way that my children will be able to remain in school on a regular basis is if the mayor puts the mitigations in place that she has committed to, has promised to parents, and continues to not deliver on.
Okay, I'm sure we'll be keeping an eye on what you and your members decide this week, and hopefully we'll talk again soon. Stacey Davis-Gates, CTU, thank you.
Thank you.
And now, Paris, back to you.
Thanks, Brandis. Concerns about students returning to classrooms come as the FDA has expanded the emergency use authorization for Pfizer's COVID boosters to children aged 12 to 15. Meanwhile, a British study finds that people who contracted the Omicron variant were about half as likely to need hospital care as those with Delta. Joining us now with more on all of that is Dr. David Slade, Associate Medical Director of Infection Prevention Control at Loyola Medicine. David Slade, thank you so much for being here. First, as many of the area school kids go back from winter break today, a lot of parents and staff are concerned over whether schools are safe for in-person learning. What does the medical data say?
Yeah, Paris, thank you so much for having me tonight. And, I have 3 children of my own, so this is certainly a very important topic. And I think we have to start by looking at the risk, the overall risk to our children. We know that traditionally children have been in a lower risk group overall for severe effects of COVID-19. But we're seeing with the Omicron variant, extremely rapid spread right now. and we are seeing increased rates of hospitalization even in children. What I can say is that still the best protection for our children and for the population as a whole is vaccination. So if your children are eligible, I would highly recommend to go out and have them vaccinated right now. We're seeing very good rates of vaccination in the older adults, but now is really time, I think, to make a push for the population as a whole. So that's key, having our students vaccinated, taking stock, as we look at the rates of hospitalization. But I think the overall risk remains low to our children right now, even lower if they're vaccinated. When we're looking at, these decisions about going to school, wearing masks versus staying home or remote learning, those decisions I think will have to be made based on the particulars. If there's, a very high rate of outbreak in a particular classroom or a particular school, then that may be some incentive to change.
And Dr. And that's what school officials have said they're going to do, go classroom by classroom on this. Speaking of vaccinations, the FDA did just authorize the booster shot for kids aged 12 to 15. What should parents and kids know about that?
That's right, yeah. So the FDA looked at the safety of the booster shot in that age group based on some data that came out of Israel recently. They looked at about 6,000 children who had received the booster dose, and it appears to be very safe, no added risks. We're seeing in the population as a whole an added benefit to the booster in protection against Omicron. So I think, a lot of incentive to go out and get the booster right now. And as I think you mentioned, it's now authorized for 5 months after completion of the vaccine series.
And Dr. Slade, a British study just came out determining that people who contracted Omicron are much less likely to wind up in the hospital than if they contracted Delta. Is that proof positive that Omicron is a less severe variant?
Everything that I'm seeing right now supports that. I think Omicron, it spreads much more rapidly, but overall, it is less severe. I think there's strong indication of that. Now, when we're seeing this huge influx of people into the hospital, we're seeing the ability of the virus to spread so rapidly almost outweigh that factor that it is less severe. So we're just seeing so many more people infected right now. Again, vaccine is our best protection, and still the majority of patients being admitted to the hospital are unvaccinated.
So maybe offsetting factors, far more contagious, but perhaps less severe. Does that mean you anticipate a steep drop-off like South Africa saw?
I do. I really do. It's really hard to predict or to say with certainty, but looking at the way we saw it drop so quickly in South Africa, I think we're looking at a very rapid spread over, perhaps a 4-week period, just very, very rapid spread. And it should, in about 4 weeks, decrease substantially. That's my hope.
Do you think this is the last variant, or will there be more variants to come? There was a Forbes article talking about the prospect of living with COVID for the time being. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. Every time we try to speculate, I've been surprised, with this, sort of rapid spread and the percentage of the population affected. My instinct is that we're really heading towards sort of the end game with the complete pandemic phase of this and more towards the endemic. If we look at past pandemics, if we look at endemic influenza, it has continued to circulate in the population for a period of time. It has been a regularly circulating virus, but, I think we can expect perhaps further variants, further mutations. Hopefully they're less severe. I think it will always be there to a certain extent, but not to the extent that we're seeing here right now, not by any measure.
Hopeful words there, perhaps the beginning of the end of the pandemic phase, as you said there. As you know, the city implemented its indoor vax policy today. Do you think that could curb the spread at all, or is that wishful thinking, given what's happened in New York City and the breakthrough infections we're seeing?
Right. I really support it. I think it's a really important measure. It by no means will lead to any, sudden stop in the spread of the virus, again, with just an extremely rapid spread. What it will do, I think, is just provide further protection, further peace of mind for people going out to restaurants. If you are vaccinated, you're substantially less likely to have a severe case, to be admitted to the hospital, and it provides protection against those severe cases and against death. So I think it's really important. It should help to slow the spread, But more than anything, I think we just need a substantial portion of the population vaccinated. And I think really getting that message out is extremely important.
And you see hospital officials everywhere talking about this, that the vast majority of patients they see for COVID are unvaccinated or don't have a booster, and the vast majority of those in the ICU are unvaccinated. Is that what you're seeing at Loyola?
Yeah, Paris, I was just working in the hospital for a couple of weeks. I just finished up a few days ago, and that really is still what we're seeing. There are some breakthrough cases. I think if you read reports from around the country, you're seeing between 70 to 90% of the patients admitted to hospitals or in ICU level care are unvaccinated. I think at this point, we're at a point in time where we've seen a lot of vaccines given. We have a lot more assurances as to the safety of it, especially the long-term safety over several months, since this all started to a year, which is just further reassurance and further incentive to go ahead and get the vaccine.
All right, Dr. David Slade, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And we're back with more right after this.
I come from a people that not only found a way to survive through the most horrific circumstances, but they thrived.
I could not save one of the boys of color in my own life. If my family could be exposed to this horror, then really it could happen to anyone. We are truly all in this together.
And there's much more ahead on Chicago Tonight, including a look at the housing market in the new year. But first, there's a new bar in Andersonville that is one of the city's only bars left catering to queer women. Chicago Tonight's Joanna Hernandez recently stopped by to learn more about the inspiration behind the bar's name, Nobody's Darling. Here's another look.
Upbeat, women-centered, fun cocktails.
Those are some words business partners Angela Barnes and Renata Riddle say describe their newly opened bar, Nobody's Darling.
I don't think we quite anticipated the response. I think we knew that queer women would be like, oh, this is awesome, you know, 2 women in our community are opening this bar. But we've had such a response from, straight people in the neighborhood, the trans community, gay men. I mean, it's just really been kind of this amazing space for people to come together and really have a mutual respect for each other.
The neighborhood bar on the corner of Belmore and Ravenswood used to be Javon Divine, a lesbian wine bar that closed during the pandemic. These longtime friends joined forces to take over this space and say they're focused on inclusivity and a good craft cocktail.
I have a passion for cocktails. It's like when I have a good cocktail, it's like biting into a juicy steak. I was like, I want to open my own bar and have that same energy and passion and give it, to other people.
As for the bar's name, Nobody's Darling, Barnes got inspiration from her collection of poetry. The poem, Be Nobody's Darling by Alice Walker, spoke to her.
The poem is about being authentic and not being afraid to, kind of follow your own path. Even if you're considered an outsider, people say you can't do something, just sort of go boldly forth and kind of be who you want to be. We felt that's kind of what we were doing, so.
Now the lounge is giving women a place to come together as hundreds of lesbian bars have closed down across the country. The Lesbian Bar Project is a short film that showcases a decline of women queer-owned bars. The film reports that since the 80s, about 200 lesbian bars have shut down and only about 21 queer spaces are still hanging on.
We're excited about being in this position, and we don't take it lightly. Every day, we're literally trying to get better in what we do because we're new to the business of this industry.
And give back. I mean, I think
definitely.
one of the things is we try to feature African-American owned alcohol as well as women-owned or queer-owned.
And when this dynamic duo are not running the bar, Barnes is a legal counsel while Riddle is an auditor. The two say they're working hard to create a lively space where they have the ability to host different events and welcome everyone from the LGBTQ+ community.
To see, your 60, 70 crowd, sitting right next to the 20-something, trans women sitting next to, like the gay boys in their 30s, something's going to happen, right? And in a really good way. And it's just the conversations.
From the aesthetics of the bar to their craft cocktails, it all blends and pays homage to influential Black and brown women.
We put our heart and our passion into the bar. When we thought about the name, from the cocktails to the way we wanted to look, it was something that, okay, when we walk into the space, we're proud of it.
Making their mark not only as two queer women, but business women thriving through the pandemic, hoping to encourage other women to go for it.
You come here to have a great cocktail, listen to music, and find community. And the conversation flows from there.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Joanna Hernandez.
And Nobody's Darling is open Wednesday through Sunday, and you can find it in Andersonville. There's more information on our website. Still to come on Chicago Tonight, employees at a Starbucks in the Loop hope to unionize. That and other business news from Cranes. Today's proof of vaccine mandate kicked in for local restaurants, gyms, and bars. We hear from business owners on what this means for their operations and more. Plus, pandemic-inspired moves and low interest rates fueled a hot housing market last year. Can sales continue at that same pace in 22? But first, some more of today's top stories. The state's COVID-19 test positivity rate has reached 17.5%, and 6,300 people statewide are hospitalized with COVID-19. The state health department says 85% of those hospitalizations are unvaccinated patients. In addition to encouraging people to get vaccinated, State Public Health Director Dr. Ngozi Ezike advises people to get tested while urging caution over some questionable pop-up sites.
There unfortunately are those who are taking advantage of these crazy times to try to scam people. So if you have any doubts about the testing location that you're looking at, go ahead and ask some questions. What lab is the testing site using? When will you receive the results and from whom?
Ezike says the IDPH website lists community-based testing locations as well as state-affiliated SHIELD testing locations. And on a programming note, Dr. Ezike is scheduled to join us on tomorrow's program. Grim statistics from the Cook County Medical Examiner show 2021 was one of the county's deadliest years on record. Last year, the ME's office handled more than 12,600 cases, the second highest in its history. That's compared to more than 16,000 cases in 2020 and an average of 6,200 pre-pandemic. COVID-19 accounted for more than a third of the 2021 caseload with nearly 4,500 deaths. Gun violence and opioid-related deaths also contributed, with more than 1,000 gun-related homicides last year. The first time there have been more than 1,000 homicide or gun-related homicides since 1994. While some test results are still pending, the ME's office expects more than 2,000 opioid-related deaths from 2021. That's beating 2020's record of 1,800. Longtime Cook County Democratic Party power broker Frank Zuccarelli has died. That's according to County Party Chair Tony Preckwinkle. Zuccarelli was a longtime Thornton Township supervisor and Cook County Democratic committeeman and a resident of South Holland. He was 70 years old. And for the first time, a same-sex couple is the first to be officially married in Cook County this year. Annually, the Cook County Clerk awards a ceremony to one lucky couple to be the first. And this year, the winners were 28-year-old Jake Harris and 29-year-old Justin Luna. The Lakeview couple had endured an extended quarantine during the pandemic because of Luna's leukemia diagnosis, which meant chemotherapy treatments and preparations for a stem cell transplant in 2 weeks. Harris had been planning to propose to Luna on New Year's Eve, but he learned they'd won the lottery and used the email to pop the big question. County Clerk Karen Yarbrough performed the ceremony via Zoom. And now to Paris with some of today's top business headlines. Paris.
Thanks, Brandis. Starbucks workers in the Loop make their first moves to unionize. A new deal values a tower on Wacker Drive at $1 billion, and a U.S. private equity firm shows interest in buying Walgreens' UK drugstore chain. Here to go behind the headlines is Crane's Chicago business editor, Ann Dwyer. Ann, Happy New Year. Great to see you as always. Let's start with that Starbucks story. So where does this union election stand right now with this Starbucks in the Loop?
Well, these workers have, a majority of them have signed union authorization cards, Paris, which means that the NLRB will now be setting a date later this month for a vote. If the card count is any indication, though, I think Starbucks is bracing itself for this particular location at Randolph and Wabash to go union. If it does, that'll be the first one here in the Midwest to have done so. As you know, there was one on the East Coast, I believe in New York State, that went union just a few weeks ago.
And as I understand, Starbucks really doesn't want this to happen. Is this a sign that we could see more union Starbucks shops in Chicago?
I think it's a very good sign that that's going to happen because, as you know, I mean, the labor movement has really been flexing its muscles lately with employers scrambling to fill open positions. It's been a long time coming for labor, which has mostly been on the ropes for these past few years. But I think that this vote is going to be watched very closely by Starbucks and other employers around the country.
The Loop office market is being watched very closely now, and there's a 55-story building, the Bank of America office building, for sale, valued at $1 billion. Who's the potential buyer here?
The buyer is, they're buying a stake in it, the controlling stake. It's an outfit called Oak Hill Advisors, a very big investment fund out of New York. And basically, this is a bet on their part that the downtown Chicago office market is still a good place to be investing. And, you know, that runs contrary to the conventional wisdom of doom and gloom around office properties in general and the Chicago Loop market in particular. But as we keep seeing, these high-profile trophy properties keep trading hands at very high valuations. This particular property has a lot going for it. It has Bank of America and its Merrill Lynch subsidiary as a tenant, of course, and it's also 85% leased. That's a pretty good number in this market right now.
It's a good number, although so many people probably at home right now because of the Omicron surge. All right, finally, Ann, Chicago-based Walgreens may have a buyer for its British pharmacy. Tell us about that.
Well, we reported before the holidays that the word was that Walgreens Boots had hired Goldman Sachs to peddle the UK and European division Boots pharmacies. And now comes word that Bain Capital is one of the private equity investment funds that's been looking at Boots. Others have as well, according to reports in the Times of London and elsewhere. Basically what this means, Paris, is that this combination, which is really only a few years old, of Walgreens and Boots, is coming to an end, and it never really lived up to the hype when it was first proposed back in, I believe, 2012.
And Bain Capital, the former home of Mitt Romney, I believe.
Correct. I believe that's right.
All right, Ann, great to see you in 2022. All the best for a great new year, and we'll talk to you soon.
And to all of you.
Today marks the first day local businesses must check proof of COVID vaccination from customers and clients in Chicago and Cook County restaurants, bars, gyms, and entertainment venues. The order is set to remain in place until the current surge of infections and hospitalizations has passed. And local business owners join us now with much more. We have Eric Archambault, owner of Rogers Park Social, a community bar and lounge. Shirley Blasichik and Marland Eastman, co-owners of Blazin' Cycle. It's a fitness studio that offers indoor cycling located in Beverly. And Darnell Johnson, owner of Chicago's home of Chicken and Waffles with locations in Bronzeville and Oak Park. We welcome all of you to Chicago tonight and Happy New Year. Darnell, let's start with you. Day one of this indoor vaccine policy. How's it going at your venue?
It's going great. It's going great. We got extra staff just to make sure they check everybody coming in. A couple extra police officers, and it looks good so far. We probably turned away about 3 people out of the day, so that's great.
And Darnell, did it get testy with any of the customers that you had to turn away?
Everything went perfect. Everything went beautiful. Everybody just understood and said they'll bring their cards next time they come in.
So smooth operations over there. Shirley and Marland, you have a fitness studio. How is this changing the way that you have to operate now going forward?
You know, it's really great because we have classes inside the studio, but we also do this 90-day Dream Body program where a lot of our people that join, they're really serious about losing weight. It's a professional program. So when they do join us, we talk about their health. We talk about whether they've been vaccinated or not. And we already implement and create a customized program. So if they want to work out from home or they want to come inside, they can kind of do what they would want to do. And I have to tell you, like, we haven't had any problems with any of our members. They're really great. Everyone's really respectful of each other. We have a really nice, wonderful place with great people.
Marlon, do you worry at all that folks might come in and say they don't want to comply with the city's mandate and the position that might put your business in?
No, for the most part, we have responsible members. So, we chit chat and we're pretty close with our members. So when we talk to them, majority of them are, we talk about, hey, have you got vaccinated, or was there any complications from your first or second shot? So everyone, knock on wood, that is our members vaccinated. So far, so good.
All right.
Yeah, in the past year, honestly, like, they come and they tell us when they're getting vaccinated. So we have, I think it's because we're a small mom and pop shop, we're a boutique. So everybody that comes in, it's easy.
Obviously very, very concerned about their health, and this goes with that. Eric, this is nothing new for you over at Rogers Park. You've had your own vaccine policy. What prompted you to get a head start on the city?
I think it's just, we're a very small neighborhood bar, and we respect our neighbors, and we wanted to do the best things for both the community as well as our employees. So we started this a couple of months ago, and literally within the past 2 months, we may have had 2 parties of, at most, a total of 8 people walk away because we didn't have it, but everyone appreciates it, and they're very comfortable coming in and also sitting outside, but they're very, very happy, and they have been for the past couple of months. So this is nothing new, and I'm really excited that the city as a whole has made the decision to require it.
Darnell, going back to you, has the city communicated with you at all about how they plan to enforce this mandate and how they plan to support you if you do have customers that don't want to comply?
Well, our Alderman has told us that she's going to have extra police in the area, so, patrolling to make sure everything goes okay. Alderman Dow has been very supportive with everything we've been doing in that community. So we haven't had any problems. We're blessed, and I think it's good for everyone to have this.
Shirley Blasichek and Marlon, has the city communicated with you at all in terms of how the enforcement here is going to work?
We really haven't heard anything from the city, but I don't foresee any problems. I don't think we need any reinforcement or anything. Like, we really have a great group of really wonderful people. And everybody that comes in here is really focused on being healthy. Yeah. We have classes, but it's not just about classes. It's about eating better, being healthy, and how to build your immune system. And so it's more of like a wellness here than just we're not a box gym. So I think that changes the dynamic of the people we have coming in here. It's really more like we're family, so we all care about each other.
So it certainly seems like everyone's kind of enforce it for themselves. Eric, what about you? Do you have any communication with the city in terms of how they plan to sort of uniformly enforce this through the thousands of establishments throughout the city?
I wouldn't say from the hierarchy of the city, but we have a wonderful relationship with our alderwoman. Maria Haddon has been super supportive and communicating with us, helping us with our outdoor kind of structures and just kind of communicating things. So I wouldn't say from the higher levels of the city, I haven't heard much, but from a local super neighborhood centric, totally in touch and a ton of outreach and stuff. So no issues there.
So it seems like this is being handled largely on the aldermanic level here. Darnell, there's been some pushback claiming that restaurants and establishments need more time to figure out how to implement this. It was about a week and a half to 2 weeks that the mayor announced this, that now it's taking place. What about that? Did restaurants need more time?
I don't feel so. This pandemic, things happen every day. You get up in the morning, you look at CNN or whatever news you look at, and it's evolving rapidly. So you have to be prepared. So this is nothing. I think the timing was great. We're living in a different age now, so we have to be prepared every day for the unexpected.
Shirley Blasichek, how does your sort of enforcement work? Do you simply check folks' cell phones, or do they have to produce their card?
I mean, today I didn't even have to ask. My members literally just showed their card. They literally showed it in my face. And a lot of them have been texting me and messaging me because we communicate through the program, through Facebook and text messages. And so everyone's been asking me like, hey, when I come in tomorrow, what's going to happen? So They can send me, I've already advised everybody, they can show it to me in person, they can text it to me, they can send it to me through Facebook. We have like an app that they can provide. So we have lots of communication with our people anyway. They have lots of opportunity to go ahead and show the card.
It's so funny because they can't wait to show us their card.
They really are excited to show the card.
Eric, are you hopeful that this can halt the spread of COVID at your establishment and throughout the city?
Oh, for sure. I think that's what we're all hopeful for, right? Is you want to stop it where you can. You don't want to be part of the problem. You want to be part of the solution. And that's something that, like, my employees, I always go to my employees and I mean, they're not employees, they're family, right? So I always say, like, hey, what are your thoughts? Where do we want to go? Are you guys comfortable opening inside? That was something that we did after we shut down for a while. So I always go for my employees first and say, are you comfortable working? Let's be part of the solution and not the problem. And that's always like withstood time. And I don't think I have any issues with how this is happening.
All right, day one of, we hope not to be too many days here of this vaccine mandate, as we hope to see this Omicron go down. And our thanks to Eric Archambault, Shirley Blasicek, Marlon Eastman, and Darnell Johnson. Thank you all so much.
No, thank you.
And up next, what to watch for in the housing market this year. But first, we take a look at the weather.
Twenty 2021 was a banner year for the housing market in Metro Chicago. Realtors sold more homes than ever, while prices rose at rates not seen since the housing boom of the early 2000s. And fueling that demand was a combination of low interest rates and folks looking to make pandemic-inspired moves to larger homes, as remote working became the norm for many. Joining us to share their insights for 2022 are Dennis Rodkin, residential real estate reporter for Crane Chicago Business, and Gwendolyn Newton, a real estate agent and president of the Dearborn Realtist Board, an African-American real estate trade association. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Dennis, welcome back. Let's start with you, please. Thanks. Why was 2021 such a frenzied year for the Chicago real estate market?
Because everybody wanted to move to a different home. If I had to work at home, have my kids in a schoolroom at home, work out at home, it was very likely that I didn't have that kind of space in the place I was already living. And with very low interest rates, I could, in most cases, I could afford to make that move. So we finished 2021 with more home sales in the Chicago area than there have ever been. In December, we passed 2005, which was the height of the last housing boom. We passed the sales volume record from that year because anybody who could trade houses did.
And Gwendolyn, was 2021 just as good a year for purchasing a home for Black buyers, purchasers?
Hi, and thank you so much for having me on this evening. The Black buyer experience was a little bit different. We did experience what I call the pandemic pandemonium, where you just had a frenzy of buyers out there, but there still were some struggles in the areas for buyers being pre-approved for loans, FHA versus conventional, coming up with down payment, et cetera. And then with appraisal issues, there were always several different hurdles and factors that Black buyers had to overcome.
Yeah, and there's been some reporting as well about Black sellers and some of the challenges that they've had with appraisals when selling their own home. Dennis, the median sale price for a home in the Chicago metro area, it rose about 12% in 2021, up to $300,000. Can the market maintain that kind of pace in 2022?
It probably can, because while we've had double-digit price growth, we've been growing in the, as you say, in the 12% range. Think of Phoenix. They've been growing in the 32% price range. A year ago, today, homes cost 32% more in Phoenix than they did a year ago. Those places are in a bubble. Phoenix, San Francisco, Seattle. We're growing at our prices are growing at a very rapid rate, but compared to most other big cities, it's not so big. There's a study out that shows that Chicago is one of the only major U.S. cities where home prices have not risen as fast as wages, which is to say you can actually afford more house than you could previously, while affordability is running away from people in other cities where home prices are growing faster than wages.
And real quick, before we move on, Dennis, you hear housing boom and, comparisons to 2005, and people get nervous because we all know what happened after that housing boom in the mid-2000s. Are we in any danger here?
Well, once again, we're not growing as fast as we were. Our prices aren't growing quite as fast as they were at that time. But also, most of this is appraising out. A lot of it in 2005 there were the low or no document loans. There was predatory lending in Black communities and elsewhere that were sort of forcing lending onto people who probably couldn't afford it. There are a whole lot of rules in place for lending that didn't exist then, that actually came into being because of those problems. And we're not seeing yet the foreclosure crisis coming the way it did the last time, because it appears that people are buying on the income they have, not on undocumented income, low document or no document loans.
Okay. Gwendolyn, historically, African Americans have been denied access to the housing market and those opportunities to build wealth because of unequal access to financing and, of course, some other discriminatory practices. What would you say the situation is like today for, say, a young African American couple looking to buy their first house?
Well, a couple things, and if I can just kind of touch on, Dennis mentioned in terms of, the foreclosure crisis. There are some levels of risk, and based on some of the reporting that I have read over the last, 60 days, there is some increase and uptick in the foreclosure space for Black homeowners. That is not to discourage young millennials and people out buying in this space at this time. I believe that, with the lower interest rates, there is an opportunity to take advantage of purchasing a home at this point. But because of the lack of wealth and the disparity between African American households and white households in economic and financial wealth, that oftentimes African Americans don't have the down payment resources. So there are some, some loan programs out there that do allow, down payment assistance, and you can also accept gifts from, family members, which has enabled Blacks, African Americans to purchase. But again, when there is a lack of financial stability, bank accounts.
Not as easy for them to. Gwendolyn,
Yeah,
I wanted to get you on this really quickly. Of course, we've seen in recent years Blacks moving out of the city, but also folks have moved out of the city because of the pandemic. Do you think these two trends will continue with people leaving the city? Gwendolyn, that's to you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you had said Dennis. Yes, by all means. I have been working with buyers that have been relocating to the suburbs where, where crime or, just living in close quarters, condominiums, apartment lifestyles where people want to have single family homes. And, backyard space has been a large uptick for during the pandemic. I've also had quite a few people relocate out of state. They have just kind of washed their hands of Chicago and they've moved down south to, Georgia, Florida, and then some, to Arizona.
And surely they've got their reasons for that. Dennis, what are some of the factors that could slow this market down?
Crime. So one of the things I track is the very high end part of the market. I look at all the market, but up at the top of the market, $4 million and up, we had an amazing year in 2021. The average number of sales in a year at $4 million and up is 51.5. In 2021, there were 100 sales at that level, from 4 million to the highest price sale of the year came right around Christmas time at $12.55 million. So of that, 37 sales were downtown condos, downtown penthouses, really, when you're talking $4 million and up. People are still investing. People of means, affluent people are still investing in real estate downtown,
but
even though what you hear is that crime is stopping people now that there is a very obvious crime problem in the downtown neighborhoods, that it's stopping people from buying. The numbers
Dennis, we're fresh out of time. I'm sure there's plenty of factors at work here, but we'll have to leave it there. My thanks to Dennis Rodkin and Gwendolyn Newton for joining us.
Thank you.
And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Monday night.
Please join us tomorrow night live at 7, one-on-one with Illinois' public health director as COVID cases surge across the state.
And WFMT is hosting a tribute to the late composer Stephen Sondheim. We'll have a preview. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm pleased to give back to the community.